All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever time you're tuning into this video, just make sure that it is good. My name is Game Boy Rob, and today, boy howdy, today we have got some stuff to talk about. In case you are unaware, in case you've been living under a rock for the past couple weeks, as a Runeterra fan, in case you weren't aware, the newest set is Shurima. Shurima is going to be the newest expansion to Legends of Runeterra, and yesterday we got our very first brand new look at some of the cards, right? We got our first taste of some Shurima cards, and I think they were leaked a little accidentally. I don't think Riot meant to release them yesterday, but they got leaked by someone, and they were really confusing, and none of them really made sense, and they were hard to evaluate, and we didn't really know what they were talking about. So I decided to wait until today to make a video about it so that we could analyze them a little bit better. So without further ado, buckle up, boys and girls. It's gonna be a long one. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about, so here we go. First things first, Renekton. The first champion revealed of Shurima is Renekton. Here he is. Wow, look at him. He's amazing. He's a big gator. He's a big croc. He's a big croc guy. Renekton is a 4-mana 4/4 champion with Overwhelm, and he says, when I challenge an enemy, give me +2/+1 this round, and then he levels up when you've dealt 12 damage. And then, you know, he levels up, he goes to a 5/5 still for 4 mana, and he still has Overwhelm, and then now he says, attack, give me +3/+3 this round. This, and then he also, and this is why I didn't want to, you know, talk about cards yesterday, because we didn't really know what's going on. He also has a third form. That's right. Champions who have this little ascended keyword tag have a third leveled up form, and we'll talk about that. We'll get to that in a minute, but for the first, for the beginning, let's just talk about Renekton's first two forms. So Renekton, you know, like a normal champion, you know, would have the first two forms. So Renekton has Overwhelm, and he has, when I challenge an enemy, give me +2/+1 this round, but he doesn't actually have Challenger, which means you have to work a little bit harder to get this buff. The easiest comparison we can make for Renekton is comparing him to Shyvana. Obviously, because he's a 4-mana 4/4, she's a 4-mana 4/4, and when they attack, they get buffs. There is one key difference between Renekton and Shyvana, which makes Renekton a very good card and Shyvana a very bad card. And you probably know what I'm talking about. That difference is this little word right here, Overwhelm. Overwhelm is a fantastic keyword. Overwhelm single-handedly can make cards good. And Renekton, I think, is going to be good because he has Overwhelm. I think that's sort of the point of Renekton, and I think he's going to be very powerful with exactly, you know, just because he has that keyword, that coveted keyword of Overwhelm. So he levels up after he's dealt 12 damage, which, assuming you've challenged with him twice, oh, and I should say, challenging does not have to be with Challenger. You do not have to give Renekton Challenger in order to give him this buff. The other way to do it is by challenging vulnerable units using Renekton, right? So if you give an enemy vulnerable, you challenge that enemy with Renekton, Renekton gets +2/+1, right? So if you can do that twice, if you can attack onto 2 vulnerable units and Renekton doesn't get like frostbitten or anything like that, he levels up, because that's 6 × 2 is 12, and then he levels up into this. So he's a 4-mana 5/5 that attacks for +3/+3. So he's basically a 4-mana 8/8 with Overwhelm. I shouldn't need to explain why this is a very, very good card. That's really, really scary in Legends of Runeterra. That's super hard to deal with. That is a game ending. You slap a couple buffs on him and you're good to go. Utterly insane. Very, very, very strong card. I think that alone should tell us that this is a pretty strong card. Now, Renekton, Level 2 Renekton actually has a level up requirement, as though he's a level 1 champion. That's very interesting. You've restored the Sun Disc, and in case you missed yesterday's new card reveals, I'll go talk about them now. So there is a card in Shurima called Buried Sun Disc, and that is this 1 mana landmark right here. Buried Sun Disc says, start of game, draw one of me if all of your cards are Shuriman. And then it has a new mechanic called Countdown. Countdown 25. Countdown means at the start of every round, I count down by 1. So Countdown 25, which means 25 rounds after you play this, you will restore the Sun Disc. And then if you level up an ascended ally, such as Renekton, Renekton is an ascended ally that can level up. So if you level up, for instance, Renekton, this gets advanced by 10 rounds, which is a pretty big deal. And then once it's done, once you get all the way down through 25 and you count down to 0, you get this. You get the restored Sun Disc, which means you immediately draw one of all your ascendants, which I assume includes Renekton, but we're not sure. This says ascended, and this says ascendants, and this says ascended. So we're not sure exactly what if those are the same thing or if they're different. That remains to be seen. But the important part is for the rest of the game, your level 2 ascendants are level 3. And I think that implies that they are in fact the same thing. So if you can get Buried Sun Disc all the way to the countdown all the way to 0, Renekton will level up a second time, and then you get this 10-10 with Overwhelm that says when I block or attack, deal 2 to enemies and the enemy nexus. Now, wow. Let me just say, wow, that's crazy. That is incredible. This is a skill, by the way, so it is something like goes out on the board and like sits there and your opponent can interact with it and stuff. But a 10-10 with Overwhelm that nukes the entire board every time he attacks or blocks. This is game ending. I shouldn't have to say how game ending this is. Essentially what this means, what we can infer from this is that Renekton and, you know, his brother Nasus and Azir and all those cards are going to be game enders if you can finish the Buried Sun Disc and turn it into a restored Sun Disc. What this means is that this quest is a really, really, really big deal. Getting Buried Sun Disc into restored Sun Disc is like generally going to win you the game, especially if you have a champion on the board. I think that's what we can understand from that. So this is going to be a very important card in the days to come, assuming it's good. With that in mind, let's look at all the cards that were revealed yesterday, now that we sort of know what it is that they are talking about. Actually, first let's look at Renekton's champion spell, and then we'll move back to the cards that were revealed yesterday. So Renekton's champion spell is Ruthless Predator. It gives an ally +2/+0 and an enemy vulnerable at burst speed. Right? That's pretty okay. It's kind of like an inverted troll chant. It's kind of like almost a shakedown, but it also gives you a buff for 1 extra mana. This card seems okay. It's okay when you're gonna occasionally draw more than 1 Renekton, and then you're gonna want to cast this as your second Renekton, and that'll be good. I don't think it's quite good enough to run in a deck, but I could be wrong. I feel like it's trying to do 2 different things at once, because generally you want to be playing this if you already have a Renekton on the board. And giving Renekton extra attack when he's already at 6 seems a little bit unnecessary, but the thing that you're giving vulnerable to will be challenged by Renekton, so it's kind of like you're giving something vulnerable, challenging it with Renekton, and then giving something else plus attack, and before your opponent commits the block. So meh, it looks okay. This is probably okay. I don't think it'll be run. Maybe it'll be run outside of Renekton decks in certain strategies, but I feel like this is mostly just gonna be run as, your second copy of Renekton. That's my basic thought there. And I could be very, very wrong about that, but that's my initial impression. Okay, back to the rest of the Shurima cards that were revealed yesterday, right? First off, we have the Poro. We have the Poro from Shurima. It does not have a new keyword, which is very interesting. Every Poro from the base set and from Targon has a keyword that is sort of associated with that region, right? Demacia has Tough, Targon has Spell Shield, let's see, Shadow Isles has Fearsome, right? Those Poros have keywords that are associated with those regions. But this Poro does not have a keyword that's associated with this region, which is really interesting. Instead, it has round start, if you've leveled a champion, transform me into Exalted Poro, which is this guy over here. Exalted Poro is a 1 mana 2/2 that has 3 random keywords. So from this, we can infer that Shurima isn't going to be getting like a new cool keyword, but it will probably be getting, you know, a lot of effects that have to do with leveling a champion. And yeah, as we go forward today, you will see that that is true. Now a 1 mana 1/1 on turn 1 that, like, if you level a champion can turn into a 2/2 with 3 random keywords is a very similar power level to most of the other Poros in the game. Most of the other 1 mana Poros in the game. This isn't gonna be like meta defining or anything like that. I mean, a 1 mana 2/2 with 3 keywords after you've leveled a champion, it probably doesn't matter very much anymore. It's probably just a 1 mana 2/2, and you know, it doesn't, you know, drawing it late in the game won't probably help you very much. So this card is very cute, looks really cool. Probably isn't going to see a ton of play, I would imagine. I just can't see a deck that wants this very much. But it's cute, it's cool. Next up, Esteemed Hierophant. This is going to be a very important card. This is the 3 mana 3/4 in Shurima. That's pretty good. 3 mana 3/4 is fantastic. Those are premium stats. You cannot ask for a better stat line for 3 mana in the game. This is literally a loyal Badger Bear, right? This is literally a loyal Badger Bear with an upside. And the upside is, when I'm summoned, advanced your Buried Sundisk 2 rounds, right? So that'll make this Buried Sundisk go to, I don't know, two less than whatever it was before, and you're 2 turns closer to essentially winning the game. You're essentially 2 turns closer to completely blowing out your opponent and winning the game. That's pretty good. This is a pretty good card in that set, in that deck. Now, I should say something I forgot to mention. This Buried Sundisk, you get it at the start of the game. You get to draw 1 for free, which we assume will be coming out of your deck in addition to the mulligan. Like you're gonna have your mulligan, you're gonna choose what to discard and what to keep, and then after that's done, if every single card in your deck is Shuriman, you draw a Buried Sundisk in addition to whatever you draw for your first turn. That's how I am assuming this. That's how I'm reading this. This is beyond Allegiance. This is something we've never seen in the game. Is you need to have literally every single one of your cards be Shuriman in order to get that effect. Which is interesting. So this is probably the deck we're gonna see a lot towards the beginning. When Shurima is released, we're gonna see a lot of like mono Shurima. You're gonna like look in the top left of your opponent's deck, and it's just gonna say Shurima. There's not gonna be a single card from another region. And you know, who knows? Maybe that'll actually be really, really good. It will be hard to tell. It's hard to tell without having seen like the rest of the cards that are coming out this set, but that is sort of what it looks like Riot wants us to do, is build a completely Shuriman deck. And Esteemed Hierophant will be in that deck. You will run 3 copies of this guy in that deck. Whether or not that deck is good will ultimately determine whether or not Esteemed Hierophant is good. But yeah, in that archetype, this guy is going to be completely necessary. I will tell you that right now. All right, and then we're gonna go down to the second row here. We've got a 3 mana 1/6 Devoted Council. 3 mana 1/6, which is Soraka's stats. And those of you who play against Tahm Kench Soraka will know that that is a big body. That is a big thing. But what makes Soraka scary is the fact that she heals herself, and this will not be healing itself. What this does is it says, round start, if you've leveled a champion, heal your champions and Nexus 2. And that's every round. So if you have leveled up a champion, and this is on the field, it will heal your Nexus and all your champions by 2 every turn. Which is great, which is amazing, but it only happens after you've leveled up a champion. And generally, I feel like getting health on your champions usually matters most before they've leveled. So I'm not quite sure how to get value out of this, but if you've I'm trying to imagine a scenario in which I have leveled up a champion and my Nexus is really low, and I'm like, maybe my champion is a little low and I really want them both to have health. I really want my Nexus to be healed and I want my champion to be healed. And that's pretty hard to imagine. That's a pretty hard scenario to come up with. So this might end up being good, but at the moment I feel like it kind of unless there's like a lot of Soraka synergy that's gonna come out later in this set. Unless that's the case, I feel like this card is probably not gonna see a ton of play, because on turn 3 you certainly have not leveled up a champion, and so this is just a 3-mana 1/6, and that's garbage. A 3-mana 1/6 that does nothing is actual trash. So playing this on turn 3 is always going to feel bad, so I can't imagine this card is great ever, but I've been wrong before. All right, and then we got the Allegiance card. We got the 4-mana 3/2 Allegiance card from Shurima, Golden Ambassador. She says, Allegiance, draw a champion and grant it +2/+2. This card seems very strong. This seems like a very, very good card. Especially given what we know of Renekton, right? Renekton seems like he would really enjoy that +2/+2 buff because he's got Overwhelm, right? So already, this looks like it's going to be really good in Shurima. There's lots of things you can combine this with outside of Shurima. If you are running a strategy that has all Shuriman cards, like a Shuriman Allegiance deck, but you're just splashing like some other region for a champion, like you splash Piltover and Zon for Victor, and you like play this as an Allegiance, draw a Victor, and give it +2/+2. That sounds very strong. Maybe you run like Garen. Maybe you splash like 3 Garen and play this to summon a Garen with +2/+2 or a Trundle with +2/+2. All those things seem very strong. I can't imagine this card sucks. Now it is Allegiance, so like we don't see a ton of Allegiance strategies these days in Legends of Runeterra, but that I think has less to do with Allegiance as a mechanic and more to do with the fact that most of the Allegiance cards kind of suck. And this one doesn't suck. I don't think this one sucks at all. I think this is a very good Allegiance card. I think this will be a pretty good deck, and I think it will fuel a lot of Allegiance strategies. So I'm looking forward to that one. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to be playing this. All right, and then Voice of the Risen, 4-mana 3/4. If you've leveled up a champion, allies have +2/+0. So this is like the third card we've seen that has to do with you leveling up a champion. And I think at this point we can start imagining that cards like this will be run, or at least tested. We will be tested in a strategy that specifically wants a champion that is easy to level so that you can play these cards and get their benefits from a champion that is leveled up. And what's interesting is we might see this in a deck that doesn't really want the effect of leveling up a champion, like of leveling that specific champion. For instance, my mind, when I see these cards, the first example that comes into my head is Teemo. If you play a Teemo on turn 1 and you get 5 puff caps in your enemy's deck, and then you on turn 3 you hit him again with 5 next and get another 5 mushrooms in your opponent's deck, and then like you play a clump of Wumps and play that 1 puff cap cloud and level up Teemo, suddenly all these cards are activated. All of Devoted Counsel and Voice of the Risen and Exalted Poro, they're all turned on because you've leveled up Teemo. And like you're probably not running a mushroom deck. You're not running like a Hexcore Foundry deck. You're just running a leveled up champion deck. And that is very interesting. That is a really cool idea. That is a good concept to try to make work in this game. And I'm a big fan of that general idea. Something we don't yet know is whether this counts as whether or not a champion counts as leveled before they've hit the field. For instance, in the case of Teemo, if I put 15 mushrooms in my opponent's deck, but I never draw a Teemo, will he count as leveled in the eyes of these cards? Will Devoted Counsel heal my Nexus 2 if I have put 15 mushrooms in my opponent's deck, but never drawn a Teemo? Even though if you click on your deck, you'll see the level 2 art of Teemo, and you'll see that, he won't, if you put in more mushrooms, you don't get the little indicator that he's leveling up. But you haven't yet seen the level up animation play. That'll I think ultimately be the deciding factor on whether these cards are viable. That's a big question mark on the power level of these cards, is whether or not that counts. Whether you have to actually draw and play that champion, or if just leveling it up passively in your deck is enough. Now, specifically Voice of the Risen, Voice of the Risen says, if you've leveled a champion, allies have +2/+0, which I assume includes herself. So this is a 4 mana 5/4 if you've leveled up a champion and all your other units are +2/+0. If you're running like a big aggro deck, this could actually be very, very strong, but most aggro decks don't level up their champions that easily or quickly. So I don't quite see this card belonging in a deck. Maybe if there's a new champion coming out in Shurima that is easy to level, you know, maybe this will see a lot of play and like goes in an aggro deck, you know, maybe this will see a lot of play. Maybe this will see play in like a Fizz Shurima deck or something. That could be pretty good. But outside of that, I don't expect to see this card very much. And then the last card from yesterday is Ascended's Rise. And this is a 7 mana slow speed spell that says level up all level 1 Ascended allies, which is very interesting. Now that we've seen Renekton and we know that he is an Ascended, you can have Renekton on the field and then play Ascended's Rise, and you'll just skip this quest. You'll just skip Renekton dealing 12 damage. He doesn't need to do that anymore. All you need to do is play Ascended's Rise, and he just levels up. If you have like Renekton and Nasus, you know, who we assume is coming out soon, on the field at the same time, if you have them both and then you play Ascended's Rise, you just level up both of your champions just by playing this card, which is an effect we've never seen in Legends of Runeterra. We've never seen an effect that just lets you skip the level up requirement on a champion, and I'm having trouble evaluating it. I think it's bad. I think like most of the time you'll be able to level up Renekton without spending 7 mana to do, you know, just to do that. That being said, as we've said before, leveling up, activating Buried Sun Disk is game winning, right? This will, if you can get this to become this, I think generally win that game like 9 times out of 10. So if you have, like I said before, a Renekton and a Nasus on the board who are both Ascended, and then you play this while you also have a Buried Sun Disk, the Buried Sun Disk is advanced by 20, right? Because when an Ascended ally levels up, this is advanced by 10. So if you have 2 Ascended allies and you play Ascended's Rise with a Buried Sun Disk, this levels up instantly. And which means both of these guys level up, and then this levels up, and then they level up into their 3rd form, you know? So like, but you have like, I'm gonna assume Nasus also is a 10/10 when he's in his 3rd form. So you have like 2 10/10s, one of them is Overwhelm, and like you're just winning the game at that point, right? So that's awfully niche. What I've said there, like having 2 champions and a Buried Sun Disk and enough mana to play Ascended's Rise, you shouldn't assume that's gonna happen very often, but maybe that's like an ultimate blowout. Maybe that's like the win con of that deck. Maybe Ascended's Rise is the way that you just accelerate yourself and win the game out of nowhere by spending 7 mana. That's possible. I assume that that's not likely and that this is not a viable card, but that is a possible future that we live in. That is a possible future where Ascended's Rise is just going to like double level up Buried Sun Disk and advance your level 1 Renekton to level 3. Like just by playing it. So maybe I'm gonna say there's potential in this card, but probably 7 mana slow do nothing is not gonna see play, but we'll have to see. Okay, so that's all the cards that were revealed yesterday. Some pretty cool stuff. So a lot of level up a champion strategies. Very excited for that. Let us move on to what was revealed today, right? Besides Renekton himself. So we looked at Renekton, we looked at his champ spell. Let us move on and look at this stuff. So the first thing we see is a 1-drop, our first 1 cost unit from Shurima, except for the Poro. This is Bloodthirsty Marauder. It's a 1 mana 3/1. This is a 1 mana 3/1 that doesn't have a negative keyword, which means this is just a better Legion Rearguard. I don't like that. I don't know how I feel about that. we have yet to see. I don't quite like what this has, what the implications this holds for Legends of Runeterra. We've seen this time and time again in various card games where, you know, the base set is released, and then as cards come out in the future, they just print a card. They just print cards that are better than cards that came before. New cards just tend to be better cards. And I'm not a big fan of that. Turn the light on a little bit in here. I'm not a big fan of just straight up power creep. I hope that when this card comes out, I hope that when Bloodthirsty Marauder comes out, they will buff Legion Rearguard, like maybe give Legion Rearguard his 1 health back, so he's a 3/2 that can't block, or something like that, so that there is actually a reason to play each card. I'm not a fan of just straight up power creep. I don't like it. And I was hoping that this game was one that would avoid that. That being said, it's not like Legion Rearguard is a great card. It's not like people are running it all the time. So I don't think that a 3/1 is going to completely break the game and suddenly be like the best card and everyone's going to be running it or anything like that. It is strong. Certainly, it is certainly strong, but I think it's comparable to something like Legion Saboteur, which is a 1 mana 2/1 that has a skill that deals 1 to the enemy nexus, right? So that's like a 3/1 on turn 1 if your opponent has no blocker, and it has advantages and disadvantages to this card. So I wouldn't say this is better than Saboteur or worse than Saboteur. It's comparable, but it is literally better than Legion Rearguard in all ways, and that makes me a little uncomfortable. That makes me slightly uncomfortable. So we'll see. Maybe they'll give Legion Rearguard his health back when when Shurima comes out. Maybe they'll like buff Rearguard to compensate for this. But yeah, I'm not a fan of power creep, so we'll see. Anyway, this is just a 3/1. This is a good aggro card. Well, we don't see too much aggro yet coming out of Shurima. At least not the early game aggro cards at any rate. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see if a Shurima aggro deck probably with Renekton will be good. But anyway, we could move on from that guy into Bakai Sand Spinner. 4 mana 5/3, which is Ash stats and Nocturne stats, and it says play, grant an enemy -1, -0, and vulnerable. And if you're like me, you're thinking, hey, that looks a little familiar. Wait a minute, isn't there another card that does that? And there is. This is basically Nocturne. This card this card is almost Nocturne. Nocturne actually is a little harder to play than this because Nocturne needs Nightfall. You have to actually Nightfall Nocturne in order to get his effect, but his effect does give all enemies -1, -0. Whereas this guy only gives one enemy -1, -0, and vulnerable. But on the other hand, Nocturne doesn't, if I remember right, Nocturne doesn't grant the unit vulnerable, and I could be wrong about that. But anyway, this unit is basically Nocturne. What I'm saying is this is basically level 1 Nocturne in a follower. And that doesn't seem very fair. Poor Nocturne, man. Poor Nocturne. Sucks to be him. But yeah, as far as the question, is this card good? Will this card be good in Shurima? We do need a lot of ways of giving things vulnerable in Renekton decks. This probably will not be that way. Granting an enemy -1, -0, and vulnerable at slow speed, generally not what you want to do. It's good with Sejuani. Like when Sejuani drops, she gives something vulnerable and then reduces its attack, right? And that's kind of what we should be comparing this to, is like a mini Sejuani. And that's okay. But I don't think 4 mana for a 5/3 body is really what we're going for here. I feel like we're going more for Exhaust and that sort of card, and we'll get to that in a minute. I don't really see this card being run a ton, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see. I could be wrong. Maybe giving vulnerable in Shurima is actually super valuable and super good, and this card will be good because it does that. But that remains to be seen. I'm not terribly impressed with this so far. But you know, in the future that might change. All right, now this card on the other hand, Raz Bloodmane. My goodness, holy crap. 7 mana 6/6 with Fearsome, right? That's not great. 7 mana 6/6 with Fearsome, that's awfully expensive for a 6/6 with Fearsome, right? This is like 2 mana more than the Shield Breaker, the Trifarian Shield Breaker from Noxus, right? That is a 5 mana 6/5 with Fearsome. This is 2 mana more for 1 more health, which sucks. However, this says attack, give enemies -2/-0 this round. Ooh! Ooh! This is basically a smaller Shadow Isles sea monster, the sea monster boat thing from Shadow Isles, the 9 mana deep sea monster that does this, that says attack, give enemies -2/-0. This card looks really scary. This might be the late game bomb that Fearsome decks have been looking for. Fearsome decks like Fearsome Allegiance, Shadow Isles, has been a deck for a long time, and ever since Pale Cascade, ever since the Pale Cascade nerf, which wasn't that long ago, they've been experimenting with what that one non-allegiance card should be. What should their one card be that's from not Shadow Isles? And they've tried it with, I've seen Iterative Improvement, I've seen Go Get It, I've seen like Get Excited, I've seen Elixir of Wrath, and I've seen Might, and like there's lots of combat tricks that people are subbing in to, you know, to that deck. But I think this is the card that they're missing. I think this is going to be the Fearsome tech, the non Shadow Isles Fearsome card, right? I think there's gonna be a deck where it's all Fearsomes from Shadow Isles and 3 copies of this card, maybe 2 copies of this card because it is big. And that's going to be the deck. This effect, give enemies -2/-0, is incredibly powerful in a Fearsome deck. That is so strong. That removes almost all blockers. In most situations, if you have a board full of Fearsomes and you play this and you attack, your opponent can block with 1 unit because everything else has less than 3 attack now, right? So I think this is incredibly scary. I think this is going to be a very, very strong card. I think Fearsomes are going to be back in the meta for a while with this card. I think day one Fearsomes might be one of the strongest decks around because of this card. So that's my take. That's what I think. I think this card is really spooky and could come out of nowhere and really surprise a lot of people. All right, moving on, we've got Exhaust. 1 mana. What is this? 1 mana spell. What is that? Focus. I assume nobody knows. It hasn't been confirmed yet as far as I'm aware, and maybe by the time you're watching this video it has been. I assume focus means what we call gem speed. I assume focus indicates can be cast at burst speed but cannot be played in response to a spell, cannot be played during combat. You know, it can be played if it's your turn and you can play as many of them as you want and then attack, but you can't play it in response to stuff, just like gems. That's what I assume focus is going to mean. Now, this is a 1 mana focus speed spell. It says give an enemy -2/-0 and vulnerable this round. This card, this is basically a shakedown. This is basically a better shakedown. If you guys, again, talking about Tahm Kench Soraka, if you've played with Tahm Kench Soraka or Undying, you'll know how powerful Shakedown is in the ability to, at burst speed, give 2 enemy units vulnerable. This can only give 1 enemy unit vulnerable, but it's got an upside, which is that it also reduces its attack, and it's got a second upside in which you know, Shakedown requires you to actually damage your own units, and this does not. So this has 2 upsides to the card Shakedown, and I think this is going to be a very, very important card for Shurima. This is probably going to be like region defining, especially Renekton defining, right? This is going to be the primary way you let Renekton hit stuff. You are going to give something vulnerable, Renekton's gonna smack it, and then, you know, you're halfway to leveling up Renekton right there. I think this card is going to be incredibly important to that archetype, and probably very important to Shurima as a whole. Very good card, super excited about it. Looking forward to using that. Okay, speaking of cards that are probably region defining, this is Quicksand. This is Quicksand. This is 3 mana, burst speed. Give an enemy -4, -0, and disable its keywords, excluding any negative keywords this round. This is essentially Shurima's version of Hush. This is going to be Hush, but in Shurima. Now Hush right now is a bit in a bit of a turbulent spot. It is definitely a good card. People are definitely needing to run Hush. Quicksand has some pros and cons when compared to Hush. Obviously Hush can get more potential value because Hush can, you know, right now a lot of the time you'll see like an Aphelios who's been sitting on the board for a long time, and he's got like 10 attack and 11 health and quick attack and lifesteal and overwhelm and all this stuff, right? And Hush will just let you kill that. You could just cast a Hush on that Aphelios and bring him all the way down to 4/4 and then trade with him. And Quicksand can't do that. Quicksand will only remove 4 of his attack and will not remove any health, and in that way is worse than Hush. However, Quicksand can be used on something like a Fiora that's attacking, you know, if Fiora is attacking into your you know, your 3/3 and she has barrier, well, I guess Hush would actually fix that too. If Fiora is attacking into your 3/3, Hush would let you trade with Fiora, but Quicksand will actually let you kill Fiora and save your unit, right? And in a lot of early game situations where Hush feels kind of bricked in your hand, like when you're going up against like a champion that has like a couple keywords and like an effect, Hush might stop them from leveling up, but Quicksand will let you completely stop their attack. And I think this is a much better anti-aggro kind of card, an anti-mid-range kind of card, and just a bit more flexible than Hush. When compared to Hush, I think this card is overall going to be able to be used in more situations, but it's not going to have like the blow up potential that Hush has in certain situations, right? Again, if you're going up against like a unit that has like 10 attack and 10 health because of all these buffs, Quicksand won't save you, but Hush will. But, you know, in most early game scenarios, when you're going up against like a Jinx or a Draven, Quicksand will save you way better than Hush ever could. So I think this is a really good card. Like probably maybe even better than Hush. This is a really, really good card. This is going to be region defining. Shurima, like every Shurima deck under the sun will be running this card. Look forward to seeing it. You're going to be seeing a lot of it. This is a fantastic card. All right, we've only got a couple left. First off, Rite of Dominance, 4 mana, fast speed, kill an ally or destroy one of your mana gems. To give all enemies -2, -0 this round. This is a really interesting card. When I first saw this, I kind of assumed it would be more fearsome tech. Maybe you would run 2 of this and 2 of Raz Bloodmane in a fearsome deck, and this would let you like remove attack from all your opponent's units, and then you could go for a big swing. You can, if you have 13 mana, you actually can play Harrowing and then play this. And that's potentially incredibly powerful. So maybe we'll see something like that in fearsome decks. That is certainly possible. But there is another use for this card, and that is just straight up punishing open attacks. In Legends of Runeterra, as you guys are probably aware, being able to set up a board during your opponent's attack turn, like after your opponent has attacked, being able to set up your board in such a way that you have a really powerful attack on your next turn is a very common strategy and is very powerful in a lot of situations. And Rite of Dominance can sort of stop people from doing that because it's at fast speed. What this kind of does is if your opponent does that, if like you spend a little bit too much mana and your opponent develops a bunch of units and you only have a couple blockers and you can't quite play your last one because you don't have enough mana, you pass the turn, your opponent attacks you with all their units. You now have the ability with this card to say, okay, that attack is going to be much less harmful. I'm gonna play Rite of Dominance. I'm gonna block with one of my little, like if I have a chump blocker, I'll just play my, block with my chump blocker, kill it with Rite of Dominance, and completely like negate that huge attack for 4 mana. Which is okay. I think that's a little playing from, that's a little too much playing from behind for me, unless you're running like a super control deck. If there's like a big control Shurima deck, this might see value that way, to do exactly what I just explained. And what's really interesting is the ability to destroy one of your mana gems. This is a 2 effect, which means if you use it on a unit, if you use this to kill an ally, in order to do this, and your opponent then like uses a mystic shot or whatever to kill that ally, this fizzles and doesn't do anything, and the huge attack still comes through. But if you use it on your mana gem, there's no way to stop that, right? There's no way to say like, oh no, I'm gonna kill your mana gem, right? That's not a thing. So Rite of Dominance will be unstoppable. It will be uninteractable if you do use it on your mana gem, and that's very interesting. That makes this card better. That certainly makes this card better. Again, maybe this can fit like a super heavy Shurima control deck, but I suspect it might see play as like a one-off in a fearsome Shadow Isles deck is my thought of where this is gonna ultimately land, but we'll see. And then we've got a 2 mana slow speed spell, Unworthy, which says give an enemy follower -4/-0 this round. But if you have fewer mana gems than your opponent, kill that follower instead. Now that's very interesting. This is a 2 mana slow speed, potentially kill your opponent's, kill a follower from your opponent, any follower. Now, currently, the only way to have fewer mana gems than your opponent is either playing Rite of Dominance and targeting your mana gem, or your opponent has ramped, right? This is just a straight up anti-ramp card, which is funny. But assuming there are more and easier ways to take away your own mana gems, this card makes a little bit more sense. Assuming that there are easier ways to take away your own mana gem, this card probably is okay, but probably not great. Generally, almost every deck in the game runs champions. You might be aware of this. You might already know the fact that in Legends of Runeterra, almost every deck has champions in it. And not every deck in the game runs expensive followers, right? There are a lot of decks in Legends of Runeterra that have like their 2 champions, and those are the important units, and all the other units are sort of there as support, and they don't really matter. And killing, using this to kill like a 3/3 or even a 4/4, like that's okay. But unless you're hitting like 7/7s, if you hit Eclipse Dragon with this, you're gonna feel like you got pretty good value, right? But the fact that it's slow, if your opponent open attacks you, you can't use it, makes it a little worse. And it's just it's ultimately gonna depend on the meta, right? There are some decks that like run big, expensive, important followers, and there are a lot of decks that don't. So depending on what's good at any given time will make this card good or bad at those given times. But that's again assuming that, taking away your own mana gems is something that you wanted to do in the first place. Because 2 mana to give an enemy follower -4/-0, that's garbage. If you're playing Unworthy and you're just getting the -4/-0 at slow speed, this is an utterly garbage card. If you're getting the kill effect consistently, then this card becomes better, but still not great, is what I'd say. And then Dominus Destruction, this is just the skill that Renekton has when he's a 10/10. his big, ridiculous, overpowered skill that should be winning him the game every single time it happens. And yeah, those are all the new cards right there. Let me know what you guys think. Sorry, this is a big long video. We had a lot to talk about. So if there's anything I missed, anything that you think I should talk about, anything that you think is going to be great that I said was going to be bad, or vice versa, let me know down in the comments section. And until then, my name is Game Boy Rob. I stream every day, or every weekday, Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, so I can see these cards. So come hang out, and I'll see you guys in the next one.